Pale Waves have returned with their 4th studio album, Smitten. Tim, some initial thoughts on Smitten?
The overall vibe is very different from their previous work. The last project, Unwanted, they had a much more pop-punk sound going on. This feels like they've gone down the realms of 80s, 90s pop rock. Not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think I was a huge fan of the previous work. As you say, they had some pop-punky vibes on previous records. It was more just like indie rock. Got heavier throughout the years, and I think they're kind of pulling it back to their origins, if you will. I'm not sure about this one. I'm not sure how I feel. It's a weird album. Do you know when you can't quite make your mind up on if you like it or it's just bland?
It makes me question what genre the band actually is now, because I would have said they were more pop-punk as of late, but this has fully thrown it up in the air as to what they actually are. But let's get straight into it with the track listing. First track is Glasgow. What did you think?
Do you know what? Coming into the album, I actually really enjoyed this track. I wasn't sure what to expect. I'd heard one of the singles before, but it was one of the more like indie rock ones. So came in strong 80s vibes. I liked the sound of it, to be honest. Really dreamy, quite like a large feel to it.
Yeah, there was massive 80s vibes out the gate, kind of set the scene for the rest of the album, which we'll get into as we go on. But my question is, why would you leave anybody in Glasgow? What a horrible thing to do.
Glasgow's meant to be all right. Maybe for a night out you'd be all right, but not a love song. What did you think?
This carries on nicely from the first track, and it flows very calmly into it. It almost feels like a continuation of the first track.
I've literally got wrote down, don't mind this, but feels ununique in every way possible. It's just the same. It's not bad. It's not a bad piece of music. If I listened to this a week later, I'd go, oh, that's a decent way to introduce the album. But it just, as you say, feels very, very similar. Gravity, the next song, more of a love song. How are you feeling about the love vibes?
Yeah, I feel like this whole album kind of touches on that side of things anyway, and they do it very well. The lyrics across this album are really good, and it's perhaps one of the most redeeming qualities throughout the whole album. The sound itself, I'm not massive on, but the lyrics... yeah, top tier.
Yeah, they touch on a lot of personal things, relationships, coming out as gay, lots of things along those lines. And I massively respect putting that out and putting that out in your craft.
Yeah, one thing I don't like that I started to notice on this track was the upward inflections at the end of every line.
I've got the exact same thing, them vocal flicks. I don't, it throws me off. Like
it's when you notice it that it becomes so apparent that you hear it at the end of every verse, every line, and you're like, oh, fuck.
But this is why I question, is that a choice? Because she doesn't do that on a lot of the notes. And I always thought maybe it was like a problem with her vocals, but is it a choice for her to at the end of each?
I think it's more of a stylistic thing more than... I think it might be choice rather than it just being something that she does. But moving off this, we went into Thinking About You. Now, this, to me, feels like a strong continuation of the previous 3 tracks. And at this point in the album, I started to think, I don't dislike these songs, but... are we going to get anything different at any point?
I would say that I thought this one felt a little bit grander. There was a little bit more depth to this song. I think it was very similar to the previous, but it had a bit more to it for me. I preferred this. Like from Glasgow, really liked, went through a little bit of and then I actually thought Thinking About You brought it up a little bit higher.
We'll move off that onto Perfume. This I quite like. There was a bit of like a country-esque vibe on this one, I felt. It was, it felt a little bit like, dare I say, Taylor Swift, very early Taylor Swift.
Oh, God, I can't say I like it now. No, Perfume, I thought there was more of a concentration on the drums and guitar in this. It felt like earlier Pale Waves material a little bit. Still had the like synths and dreaminess in there, but it did actually seem like a band as opposed to just like a singer and like, I don't even know, like an 80s beat in the background. I liked this one. I'd say that this is actually probably one of my favourites from the album.
This track and the previous ones were where I started to really notice the somewhat repetition and also really started to pick up on the upticks at the end of the verses. And that's kind of started to make me think, am I liking this?
It's made you fall out with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought that compared to the previous tracks, this switched up the tempo because I could actually hear the drums audibly. So it made it feel like, all right, maybe it's going to go in a different direction here. And then we went on to Last Train Home, which completely brought it back down to calmer vibes. I really wasn't a huge fan of this track.
Yeah, my comments are, I don't really have any comments other than I'm getting kind of bored at this point. At this point in the album, I had started to switch off and I'd started to really struggle to differentiate when one track track had ended and the next one had started.
I know what you mean. And I think the issue is, if you had maybe 2 or 3 of these tracks littered throughout your playlist, individually you could probably find a lot of redeeming factors. As you say, the lyricism is strong and the actual production of the music is very good, but it does all sound super similar. And I don't really know why they've done it that way, why they've got so many influences and different sounds throughout the discography. Why not just throw a little summer in there?
I get going with a theme for an album and kind of going with an overall, structure for the songs. But when you're doing it kind of rinse and repeat on every track, it feels a bit, And then we've got Kiss Me Again, which I have written down here, should have named it Same Song Again.
I just literally have meh.
Yeah, I can't really say much more than that.
Miss America, the track after, on the other hand, I thought that this was kind of on the heavier side of the album tracks, and it was good. It was good to switch up the tempo, but this didn't feel like a unique track either. It felt like any indie song that I've heard in the last decade.
So for me, this is probably one of my favorites off the album. And like you're saying, I think it's because we got that kind of like a little bit of a heavier sound. There was a little bit more substance to it, in my opinion. But I felt like it was over a bit too quickly. And the fact that all these tracks are almost exactly 3 minutes long, this one felt like it was much shorter, so I had to check the track listing. But then I went, no, it's the same length as the others.
Okay, so maybe this is a top track for you off the album. If you wish it lasted longer,
that's what I'm saying. This is one of my favorites. Yeah.
Okay, fair. Like I liked it because of the heavier vibes, but just thought it's still not special, if that makes sense. Hate to Hurt You up next. What did you think of that?
I really don't have any notes at this point. I've got written down, again, feels like I've heard this 5 times already, really starting to question what the theme on this album is and whether they're ever going to deviate from it.
See, I actually really liked this song, and I quite like the lyrics behind it and stuff. The only issue with it for me, the chorus was in, must have been 60% of the song. If it was less repetitive, this would have been fantastic. If they added another verse or 2 in there, I think that this would be up there. But because the fact it was just chorus, one verse, chorus, it ruined it for me a little bit. Good instrumental. I think they nailed it with that, but just let themselves down.
Don't get me wrong, the instrumentals across the album are amazing, but they're very samey. And I'm going to have to keep saying it, and I hate that I have to keep saying it, but repetition is just throughout this album.
Were you seeing stars by the end of this?
Seeing Stars kind of felt like a 1975 track to me.
Well, to be honest, half of this album feels
the first song I went, oh, fuck.
No, it does. They definitely pulled influence from the 1975, but obviously they're just pulling influence from the 80s, so it's just gonna...
This would fit nicely into... You remember the Disney Channel movies that they used to do in the 90s? This song could be on a soundtrack for that, and it wouldn't be out of place. And that's not to discredit the song, because there are some songs from those films that were really good. But, again... Can we get something different at some point, please?
Before we get into our thoughts on the last couple of songs on the album, remember to hit like and subscribe if you're a big music fan, because we do lots of album reviews and lots of overall music deep dives, so hit the buttons. But the last 3 tracks, Imagination.
I quite like the vocals on this one. I did quite like the vocals on this track.
I thought this was a proper indie number. I like that. For me, for my music taste, I just want some indie vibes. I thought this hit the nail on the head. One of the better tracks on the album for that. Still has that kind of shoegazy background, but it's better than the other songs at it, whilst keeping a bit of energy and tempo in there.
Yep.
Slow up next.
This was a slightly different feel. It felt like they kind of brought it down. I think this is the last track on the album.
Mm-hmm.
And this felt like a good ending to the album, but again, it's just a slower version of what we've previously heard.
Yeah, I think the issue with this is they nailed the dreamy vibes, and this song shows that. It's a great song, but I've heard it 6-7 times already. It does close out the album well, but should we move on to giving some thoughts on the album as a whole?
So I really liked their last album. I thought that was a very good album. Going into this one, I thought, we're going to go down that same route. It was entirely different. I gave him a couple of tracks to get into it. I started to really like those first couple, but then after that, I really couldn't get into it.
It was a shame for me because after hearing the first track, I was genuinely excited. I was like, oh, this could be big. This could be something I'm really into. I'm a huge 1975 fan. I like those 80s vibes. But the repetition throughout, the lack of a kick throughout failed to keep me interested in the album. And I think it's a shame because I like Pale Waves, and Really, I quite like a lot of the discography. I've seen them live multiple times. But imagine if you was watching this live and they did 5 or 6 songs off this album, you'd just be like, oh, have I heard this one yet?
You'd be like, have they finished the last one? Did they go into the next one? So for me, I'm not really an avid pop rock fan. It's just not really my thing. So to me, the entire album sounded like one continuation of a single song. I've got nothing amazing to say about the album, but at the same time, I have to admit, I've got nothing terribly bad to say about the album. I don't think the songs are particularly awful. I just think it's boring.
Yeah, if you heard them in singles, you go, oh, that's a decent track, that. This album could be good. So I suppose I don't want to overhear on them. As I say, I just wish that they'd used some of the previous vibes throughout this as well. But you don't love it, you don't hate it. What would you rate it?
Oh, I liked that. I'm going to give it a solid 4.
Wow.
4 out of 10. The reason for that is because the first couple of songs, like I say, really got into them, really liked them. After that, I couldn't name a single track that I could pick out of the bunch, really.
I'm actually not too far away from you. I'm at a 4.5 out of 10. As you say, I think realistically, it's produced well. It's quite meaningful lyrics throughout. It's just too repetitive for me.
All I want to ask for is a little bit of variety. That's it. Just a little bit, 1 or 2 tracks here or there. You've got a 12-track album. Throw 1 or 2 slightly varying tracks in there. Don't do every track after one blueprint. But yeah, unfortunately, it's a bit of a miss for me.
And if you want some variety, go check out our other album reviews. We've done Wonder Horse, Midas recently, Fontaine's DC, Romance, Eminem, Kanye West, everyone you can think of. That's fucking
that's wide
variation
range
right there, isn't it? But no, thanks for watching.
Thank you very much.